is not what we hoped for. There's an outcome I didn't exactly hope for. What would you like me to do now?
Works.
Okay. So then we find ourselves wondering, should we have worked harder or longer or used a better recipe or better campaign materials? You know,
Just turn it on.
there is an object lesson here. And haven't we all done the same? Thought we had our microphones all ready to go, and then it didn't come out the way we hoped. Working harder, longer, that is a kind of besetting sin for our culture. And then we find ourselves working 24/7. At least Simon Peter, he had the good sense to know when to leave his empty boat and wash his empty nets. And notice that it was just at that point of human vulnerability, of empty nets and emptiness of hope, to tell the truth, that Simon Peter had the ears to hear. Put into the deep water and let down your nets for a catch. The fishermen who heard and followed this command then discovered an amazing catch. So much so that the very tools of their trade, their nets and boats, were breaking and sinking. And what a surprise, no? And then more surprising still, they didn't stay around for the fish fry. Instead, they left everything and followed him. Which leads me to a few present-day questions. In our own moments of emptiness and exhaustion, perhaps we hear Jesus calling us to fish in deeper waters, but what then are we supposed to do? Where exactly are those deeper waters? Now, I don't know the answer for Christ Church. One thing I know for certain is that fishing tends to be very location-specific. Fisher people among us know that. But deeper waters do always exist, for the Bible tells us so. For example, there was a time when the Episcopal parishes would not have considered climate resiliency grants in their mix of income, but you went fishing in those deeper waters, found a new kind of abundance. My own cathedral in California has a huge, and when I arrived there, almost entirely unused undercroft. Now, that's Anglicanese for basement. It does sound better, though, doesn't it? But in our case, it actually was a rather lovely gathering space and had plenty of natural light because there were light wells. Great place to do things. But when I arrived, I was informed that we couldn't do anything to use or change the downstairs space because once upon a time, we ran a summer vacation Bible school with 100 kids who would need the whole space when they came back. Let that sink in for a moment. Full disclosure, I went reading the vestry minutes. We never had 100 kids in vacation Bible school. But nevertheless, that deeply embedded narrative had convinced a lot of Trinity Cathedral members that our undercroft was no kind of deeper water to go fishing in. Now Trinity partners with a community organization that serves 1,000 vulnerable people a month with food and clothing and referrals from that same undercroft space. Abundant Christian service from the deeper waters of the underground of our cathedral. That was our deeper water. Is it possible there is more deep water for you to fish in at Christ Church? I don't know exactly where. You may not even know yet, but I assure you, it is there. But returning to our lessons, notice that the point where things really got complicated was when Peter found himself with all those fish. When we find ourselves with unexpectedly abundant resources, what happens? If today's gospel is any guide, we pull our overloaded boats to shore and we follow Jesus. That is to say, we actually leave that net-breaking haul of fish behind and go looking for other shores, as our hymn teaches. And I really want to put a pin in that detail because it's something I myself usually want to gloss over. I'm always looking for the party at the end of the story, the wedding feast of the Lamb, so to speak, to use the biblical metaphor. And sometimes a great party with lots of fresh fish is just what we need. It's a taste, a foretaste of the glorious fullness of God's reign. But we live in the here and now, when our nets may well come up empty for a season, and there are other times when we choose to leave even our fullest boats behind because we know that someone else is hungry. Just 2 weeks ago, I was in Alexandria, Virginia. I spent a week at one of our Episcopal seminaries training postulants for ministry with Spanish speakers. We weren't actually teaching them the language, for the most part, but rather the skills of cultural competency needed to minister with new Episcopal communities, some of which will be Latinos, some will be Middle Eastern or South Asian, some will be young or gender nonconforming, or with no prior experience of church. Realistically, there'll be all of these. And also black and white and multilingual and multicultural like you at Christ Church already are, thanks be to God. And like all the new communities of seekers, you will welcome. Now, how we'll do this isn't exactly clear. We're going to have to take risks. Sometimes it won't work out. We're going to have to find resources in the deeper waters where we've never fished before. This, I assure you, we won't be doing it alone because we're a connective church and we can learn from each other while we innovate. But what we can know for sure is why we do this. I could see the why in the enthusiasm of the seminarians in Virginia. I could see it in the team that attended the little conference with the Episcopal Network for Stewardship on Friday. I heard it in all the lessons this morning. We do brave new things because we discover the abundant glory of God, not in fish, but in people. That's the lesson this morning, which Peter came to understand as God's real abundance when he left behind that glorious feast of fish. Red and yellow, black and white, we are precious in God's sight. People are the real glory of God. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory, wrote Isaiah. Your neighborhood, your city, your state are full of yet more of God's glory to be known. So who among us will leave boats and nets and all the familiar ways of doing things and go out into the world already looking for the peace of God we have to offer? You know the answer better than I do. Here I am.
Send me.
Okay, let's do that with some real heart. Here I am.
Send me.
Amen.